everybody. Bridget Lynn Dolgoff, Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And I was listening to the country music station, and there's that, song, Church Bells Ringing, by Carrie Underwood, right? So today I thought today was the day that I should probably tell a story, because hearing that song tightens my stomach up and just makes me like really, emotional, just because I lived something pretty similar to it. So I had met somebody, and to this day I'm not sure if he was a handler or if it was legit or what, but he did come from a blue blood family, white collar, old family money. He came into a bar that I worked at part-time called the Blue Lamp. And in Reno, the Blue Lamp was pretty famous, and I was one of the original Blue Lamp girls. Yeah, back when I was thin and hot, before brain cancer. But I'm trying to get thin and hot again, right? It's just, there's so much stress and just so much stuff going on that it makes it tough. But soon, hopefully, I'll have my metabolism straightened out, because the tumor was in my pituitary, so I could look at an apple and gain 20 pounds. So it's all good. At least I like who I am, I love who I am and who I've become, more than ever in my entire life. So when I was around 27, I met this guy. And at first, when we started going out for drinks and dinner and stuff like that, the way he dressed, well, he had the, the pinky ring, the old heirloom pass-me-down man ring that shows, his entitlement, his status. But I didn't really understand a lot of this stuff. Back then, I was still modeling quite a bit. Part-time. I was almost at a close with it. And, I was starting out my private practice, working on people structurally. And, I met him. And I have to tell you that, the first 9 months of our relationship to this day is probably the best period of my life. Just because, it opened a whole world to me. Even though I had traveled up until then, I still was a very small town girl. But wanted to be, a global mind. And so I learned a lot from him, education-wise, historically. Just it was a really good experimental, period of my life. And because, he grew up and lived in a totally different way than I grew up and lived in. And, didn't really have to ever pay for anything. Everything was always paid for, including his doctorate, And I've, paid for my entire education. And I probably, if I could put it all together, I probably have like 2 doctorates. But, I've had to pay cash for that. And to continue to study and build my body of work and, whatever else. So, we just kind of were good friends, and we're really attracted to each other. He was gorgeous. Back then I was gorgeous. And we were together for about 3 years, and about year 2, just things went terribly wrong. And he started becoming extremely, verbally abusive, and was starting to kind of openly flirt with other women, and, then would lie to me. And, anyway, it all finally, came to a head when I went went through this period where he asked me one day, we're having wine and we're sitting on the couch, and he asked me, he said, so this was like 2.5 years probably, we're living together, and he said, so how would you kill me? And I was like, excuse me? And he goes, no, you know, he goes, I've thought about how I would kill you. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. I was shocked. Just never would consider even thinking those kinds of things about another person. You know, and then the abuse started to kind of skyrocket. We had a really awesome woman from like Russia who was cleaning our house, who, you know, when he wasn't there would pull me aside and just say, you know, like, you know, he doesn't care about you, and, you know, why are you still here, and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And I was the one that actually paid her for coming to clean. I was responsible for, you know, half the bills. So, you know, it just got to be really crazy. So there was an incident where I had to call the police. He physically, you know, he was verbally and abusing me, and mentally and emotionally abusing me. And then he physically abused me, and I was terrified at that point. And so I needed to get on the plane the next day to go to Canada to work. I was going to be there for 15 days, seeing clients of mine up there, because I went like 3 times a year. And it was like he pulled out all the stops to try to make it like impossible for me mentally to leave, or I don't know, you know, like, you know, he just... So I ended up calling a friend of mine and leaving a message and just saying, hey, look, I'm going to need a place to stay when I get back, and I'm going to leave most of my stuff here. I took my bird, I had a pet bird, and I took her to the vet so that she was being housed safely. And I always took her to the vet. They always, you know, housed her because, you know, and she was always like the princess. So she got a vacation from me anyway. But, and then I just left stuff, packed my bags, and, you know, had to call police on him. So my friend that I left a message with, you know, calls me and says, right in the middle of like knockdown, drag out stuff that's going on. And I said, I have to call the police. I called the police on him, and he's turning it around on me. The police are here, and he's blaming it on me, and he's like changed the whole story, and I don't know if I'm going to go to jail or not. And my friend is like totally shocked because nobody kind of knew what was building up, right? Or had been building up, because I didn't talk about it, right? I just couldn't deal with it. I just, you know, had to keep working so that I could get money, so that I could get out, blah, 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 blah. So when my friend comes the next day to pick me up, thank God I wasn't in jail, but she gave me the key to her house. She took me to the airport, and then she's going to pick me up, you know, when I came back. And then I ended up staying at her apartment for about, I don't know, 3 weeks before I finally found another place, and then finally found this really awesome place to rent out in the country. And when he found out that I was at my friend's house, he was actually calling her up because he knew her through me, and was getting her to go and play tennis with him. I mean, this is how sick, you know, these guys are. And they don't have to have money to be, you know, sickos. Abusive, dominating, you know, people. But it's really sick, you know, like how their mind works. I mean, you know, psychopaths are a very interesting situation if you get involved. And most of the time, people don't make it out. You know, most of the time, women don't make it out. They end up dead or shot. Or I had a client of mine at the time who was one of the assistant deputy attorneys, you know, that worked kind of underneath the district attorney for the state. And I remember after everything was going down and I had to go get a concealed weapon and I was carrying a gun. I carried a gun on my person for 4 years. And, I had to get my mind wrapped around the fact that, if he came to my house unexpectedly, that he was going to harm me and or kill me. And that I had to, I was going to have to defend myself, or I was going to be seriously hurt. And or, like in a wheelchair, who knows, a coma or whatever, if he didn't do the job right. And she showed me this huge stack of files of all of these women in northern Nevada that had been killed by their husband or boyfriend from anywhere during living with them up to 20 years after the person had left. And that eventually they would come back and they would kill the person because at some point in their mind they got it that, you destroyed their life. So I was advised by top legal people, as well as a guy that I got my concealed weapons permit from was a retired LA SWAT, and also from a 22-year veteran black lieutenant in the Reno Police Department at this time, which is back in the day, that under that I should never put my home physical address on any paperwork, that I should make an effort to make sure that he will never be able to find me or put the dots together where I might be, because I have to worry about it for years and years and years and years. Now it's been about, I think the final episode came at age 30. And he had found out where I lived. I was in this cottage, kind of hidden and everything else. And he started coming there and he wanted to, so I was, about 30. So we went to a couple therapy sessions, and we went to a therapist who had been a friend of mine, who was a therapist of mine, marriage and family. And we were colleagues at one time. Like, we shared clients to help them, in different levels of their healing. So we went to see her, and there was a point after the third session that she said, if I continue to see him or try to work things out, because he was a sociopath, that she, number one, couldn't be a therapist to help me, and she couldn't be my friend because I was in serious, serious trouble. And that he was highly, highly dangerous just because of his behavior. His disassociation of the things that he had done to me. He just would shut down and, because there was this massive disassociation. So the thing is that, he was like saying, oh yeah, well, I think I'm going to, go through therapy. And she was suggesting other types of therapy and stuff like that. But then there was this day where she said, if he chooses to get therapy and maybe get well, he's probably always going to have these patterns. And it's going to take a huge amount of effort and cost and money for the next 7 years for him to work out a lot of this stuff. I mean, are you willing to deal with him as is? Maybe even gets worse as he's working through this stuff for the next 7 years. I was like, absolutely, positively not. So then I just had to work on, restraining him and constantly like deflecting him. And at one point, because there was really nothing else I could do. So I've known a lot about magic and all this other shit, shamanism, my entire life. And I used a curse spell on him, which really made it difficult for him to get into my space physically. And I buried it in the ground. So nobody could find it, nobody could figure out what it was. And, I doubted very highly that he would know anyone that knows anything about this type of magic. So it was like the darkest magic I think that I ever used, and had a sacrifice. animal sacrifice, and just all kinds of stuff, and I knew that it would work, but it was one of those things that I never really ever wanted to do to anybody. But I had to block him, and I didn't care if the curse actually killed him. And I was using the curse also to keep him out of my space, but to target his liver. So about a year later, so I finally don't hear from him, right? And I stopped hearing people in the neighborhood saying that his car, there's somebody sitting out in front of your house, blah, 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 blah. So all this stuff starts to finally go away, and I don't hear anything. And a really good friend of ours, who's a pretty famous guy, he was super famous in the 80s. He was on the news a lot worldwide. Can't mention his name, but he calls me, and he knows the guy that I was dating, because before we broke up, and then this guy that I was dating is now living up in Lake Tahoe, and so he's around this other person a lot. And my friend starts to notice like really weird things about him, and starts to be, like, oh my gosh, I think Bridget's right. I mean, this guy is a sociopath. This guy is like wacko, So I get a call, and he tells me that off the record, that I need to call the ATF because there are diagrams of my vehicle in his house, and he has several assembled bombs that he got through the Sacramento Hells Angels, because now my ex is funding the Sacramento Hells Angels. It's like, what? And even sicker is one of the guys was going to dedicate his daughter's virginity being popped to him for the money that he was giving him. It was like, just the reports I was getting from people are just like, beyond belief. So he was planning on, even a year later, getting the plastic explosives under my car. And he blatantly told our mutual friend, and our mutual friend was like, dude, I'm done with you. Don't ever come near me. Don't touch me. Don't even come into my space. Dude, we're done. We're done. You come near me, and I'm going to the CIA, the FBI, law enforcement, stay away from me. So he calls me and tells me about what's going on. He's like, you got to call the ATF. You got to, call these people. Like, your life is in serious danger. He's just a nut job, and he's just not going to quit, And he's like, you're right about everything and the whole 9 yards. And so I ended up calling the ATF, but this is like I don't know. I'm going to say this was like 4 months, 6 months or something before 9/11. Yeah. I mean, this has been like 21 years now, I think. Whatever long. But yeah, so the ATFs, I gave him his name and everything. I'm sure they looked him up, and then they started laughing at me, like, oh, he has plastic explosives. Oh, yeah. Well, do you understand his family? And, that, these are not people that, even the ATF's going to file charges against. And we're going to have some other people contact you, about this. And then the other people called me and threatened me, saying that, I shouldn't be putting false accusations on people, especially people with political power and families. And so nobody investigated it. So I had to go local, and I had to file all kinds of paperwork and talk to people about, how I was going to protect myself and the things that I needed to do and what was going to happen and how he was going to play this out. And I had a lot of support, I had a lot of support in the communities that I were in to make sure this wasn't going to happen. But so whenever I hear, even though that song came, years later, Church Bells Ringing by Carrie Underwood, man, it just makes me super emotional because I lived that. And I don't think that people really understand. And it was really like the cherry on top of just so many things going on. I think that really led to my brain cancer and was kind of like, the axe cutting down the last piece of the tree. And so the last 21 years has just been, hell. And not just because of him and all of that, but just, everything else that was going on at the same time. My whole family was dying, 15 people. My sister's husband got murdered in the SWAT in Canada. Had to help her get back to the U.S. in 2010 with her children. I had 2 really close friends murdered within a year of each other. I lost everything. I lost $800,000 in investments and retirement. I got brain cancer. Shouldn't have survived. My relationship. I mean, after that, relationships were completely and totally tainted. Because he just, I'm not really sure if I'll ever actually be able to date anyone, because I don't know if I'll actually be able to ever recover from, what he did. And, how long I had to live, under just extreme conditions and just... Anyway, yeah, so this video is for the survivors and all of you women out there that have undergone really horrible and abusive scenarios with men and relationships. Yeah, so today this one's for you. And I'm with you. I get you. And, you hope that there's a point sometime where you could actually, 21 years later, I still don't trust anybody. And I'm still struggling, and I'm still, healing, and I'm still doing a lot of things. I mean, I feel like I'm moving forward more rapidly than I ever have in my own personal growth and my mind and my emotions and my spirit. But there are some really horrible things that can happen to you in your life that you just never really get over, I think. Anyway, I gotta run. I've got a lot of stuff to do, and I've got to keep my, self together and not let myself fall apart. But Bridget Lynn Dolgoff, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project, over and out.